Hello, everyone. My name's David, and I'm one of the elders at Grange Baptist Church. Some of you might have come to Grange Baptist when we had our messy church times. But of course, we've not been able to do that for a while. So it's nice to be able to come together with our friends from the other churches in Tuffley to share our messy Easter, our church in Tuffley messy Easter. I'm going to just tell you now the story of Easter, um, and I hope that you'll be able to listen to it and enjoy this, and it will help you as you do your messy activities today. So our story starts after Jesus had a lovely supper with his friends, and after the supper, Jesus and his friends talked for a long time. Then they crossed the brook and went to the Garden of Gethsemane, which lay on the other side of the valley. Silver grey olive trees spread protective branches over their heads, and the evening air was nice and still. Jesus went away from them just a little way and began to pray. But then his friends got very tired and fell asleep, and they didn't hear what Jesus was praying. So twice Jesus came back to them, needing their friendship and their comfort. But both times they'd nodded off to sleep again. The third time, when he returned, he said to them, "You need to wake up now. There are not some very nice people are arriving, and they're quite close." Then, in the distance, they saw some bright torches bobbing up and down through the darkness, and soon they could see that the figures that were coming towards them were soldiers and men armed with sticks. Now Judas, who was one of Jesus' friends, walked just in front of them. He went up to Jesus. "Master," he called out, and he kissed Jesus as if they were still best friends. And it was the signal that the soldiers needed to swarm forward and hold Jesus tight. Jesus said, "Who are you looking for?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. "Well, I am he," Jesus told them. For a moment, the soldiers, they fell back a bit. They weren't sure. Jesus said, "I've told you that I am the person that you want. Arrest me and let my friends go free." So the soldiers and Jewish police guards came forward again and seized him roughly. They tied him up and began to march him away to the high priest's house. Well, after a long night at the high priest's house, the high priest tried in vain to find some sort of charge to bring against Jesus, to blame him for something, but they just couldn't. The high priest grew quite desperate. How could he condemn Jesus legally? At last, they put Jesus on oath and they asked him a question. "Are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God?" Well, Jesus answered with complete certainty, "Yes." The high priest gasped in horror. "There's no more to be said," he said. "This man has confessed to his own crime. He deserves to die for saying that he is God's son." So Jesus was handed over to the custody of rough and brutal soldiers. Now, although the Jewish court had reached a verdict to say that Jesus was guilty for saying he was God, they couldn't sentence Jesus. That could only be done by the Roman authorities. So the next task that they had was to persuade Pilate, the Roman governor, that Jesus was a threat to Rome and to Roman rule, and therefore should die. Pilate was staying in Jerusalem at this time during Passover. Now the city was packed with excited people who'd come from all over the land, and some people were getting a little bit nervous. Well, Pilate must be at hand, they thought, in order to keep some sort of order that was needed. and in case trouble broke out. Well, early Friday morning, the Jewish council sent people to Pilate, taking Jesus with them in chains. "This man says that he's a king," they reported. "He tells people not to pay tax to Rome." When Pilate looked at them, he guessed that this was just a made-up charge brought against Jesus because they were jealous of him, of the things that he'd been saying about how much God loved them and how to really live as good people. So he began to question Jesus for himself. So he said to Jesus, "Jesus, are you really a king?" "Well, my kingdom does not belong to this world," Jesus answered. "And if it did, the people who were there would be defending me. But my subjects do not go to war. My purpose in coming into this world is to speak the truth. And everyone who belongs to the truth listens to me." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. He was quite certain by now that Jesus was innocent, and he made up his mind to just dismiss the case and let Jesus go free. But the Jewish leaders had quickly rounded up a group of supporters and stationed them outside Pilate's residence. As soon as Pilate came out and announced, "The prisoner is innocent," they began to chant, "Crucify, crucify," over and over again. Pilate tried once more. "It's Passover, so I shall set a prisoner free to celebrate. Shall I release Jesus?" "No," they screamed back. "We want Barabbas." Barabbas had been thrown into prison for riot and for murder. Well, Pilate's courage began to fail. If he insisted on releasing Jesus, there would be trouble and a lot of fighting in the streets, and he'd have to answer to it. It would be wiser, he thought, to simply wash his hands of everything that had happened. So with a despairing shrug, he handed Jesus over to the Roman soldiers, and they flogged him, and they beat him, and then they led him away to be put onto a cross. Well, the Roman soldiers led Jesus through the crowded streets of Jerusalem to the place of execution, which was just outside the city. The Romans crucified all sorts of people there by nailing them to crosses. Slaves, criminals, and it wasn't very nice. Jesus was already weak from being held all night long, and because of his flogging, which was really very painful. So the Roman officer in charge of the execution decided that somebody should help him to carry his cross. So they called somebody over, a man called Simon, and Simon helped Jesus carry his cross. Now, some of the ladies who were with Jesus at this time, they were so sad and they were crying, but they carried on walking alongside Jesus all the way to the place he was going to be crucified. They were crying because they didn't want to see this kind, good teacher going to his death. And some of Jesus' close friends were there too. There was Mary, his mother, and John, one of his disciples, and they stayed close to Jesus right until the end. Now there were two other men brought with Jesus who were also led out to be crucified. And when they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there and the other two criminals, one on his left and one on Jesus' right. As they were putting Jesus up on the cross, Jesus cried out, "Forgive them, Father God. They don't know what they're doing." But the Roman soldiers didn't care. They took Jesus' clothes and they divided them up amongst themselves. All the people stood there watching whilst people were jeering and saying horrible things to Jesus, like, "Oh, you saved other people. Come on, if you're the Messiah, if you're Son of God, save yourself." And the soldiers that were there, they also mocked Jesus, and they came up to him and they forced some cheap wine into his face. "Save yourself if you're the King of the Jews." They even put a sign above his head that said, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging on one side of Jesus was also being mean. "Aren't you the Son of God? Save yourself and save us too if you really are." But the other criminal on the other side of Jesus said, "Hold on a minute. Don't say that to Jesus. Don't you fear God? You and I, we are criminals. We really do deserve this. But Jesus hasn't done anything wrong. We deserve what we get, but Jesus doesn't." And then he looked at Jesus and he said, "Jesus, will you remember us? Will you remember me when you come into your kingdom?" Jesus said, "I will. And I can promise you this. Today, you're going to be with me in heaven." It was about 12 o'clock, and then the sun stopped shining, and there was darkness that came all over. And that lasted until about 3 o'clock. Then all of a sudden, there was a great big tear in the temple as the curtain in the temple tore in two. At this point, Jesus took a deep breath and cried out, "Father, into your hands I place my spirit." And at this point, Jesus died. That's where we're going to finish this part of the story, but we're going to find out what happened again later and what happened afterwards.